The moment they announced the promotion, I already knew my name would not be called because I had taken a failing project no one wanted fixed, rebuilt broken systems, worked nights and weekends, absorbed pressure that burned others out, and delivered results that reshaped the entire quarter. Yet when leadership gathered everyone together, my work quietly became someone else's achievement, and as applause filled the room I watched credit change hands in real time while a promise made to me dissolved without explanation, and I understood instantly this was not about performance or merit but about power and who was allowed to have it. My name is Elena, and at the time I was a senior operations analyst at a mid-sized logistics firm, the kind of place that talked endlessly about transparency, teamwork and growth while quietly rewarding favoritism behind closed doors. I had been there 4 years, built my reputation from nothing, and earned trust the hard way by fixing messes without complaining, staying late when others missed deadlines, rebuilding systems when they failed, and stepping into rooms only when things were already on fire. Which is why when my director assured me that leading the Phoenix project to completion would come with a promotion, I believed him because I had already proven myself again and again. The Phoenix project was a full operational overhaul involving 3 departments, outdated software, angry vendors, and an impossible timeline. 2 people had quit before me, 1 transferred out, and the rest openly said it would fail, but I took it anyway because I was told clearly that if I pulled this off I would step into leadership with a new title, real authority, and a salary that finally matched my workload. So I documented everything, every milestone, every approval, every late-night message telling me to push harder and deliver faster. I did exactly what was asked, and more. When the project launched successfully, revenue spiked, error rates dropped, and senior management suddenly wanted case studies built around it. I was invited to meetings I had never been invited to before, praised privately for my execution, and for the first time I believed the reward was real. Then came the all-hands meeting where promotions were announced publicly to showcase growth and inspire loyalty. I remember adjusting my blazer, sitting straighter than usual because I finally felt seen, and then they called someone else's name. The room clapped, smiles were exchanged, and the director spoke about leadership, innovation and ownership, using phrases pulled directly from my performance reviews. The person promoted had assisted for 3 weeks at the end, taking over a task I had already completed, and I watched her shake hands and accept congratulations while my contribution vanished in plain sight with no acknowledgement, no explanation, and no follow-up afterward. When the meeting ended, people avoided eye contact and the director left early. I went back to my desk, opened my email and waited for a message that never came. Hours passed, then days, and when I finally asked for a meeting I was told the decision had already been made and that I should be proud of the exposure I gained. But exposure does not pay rent and pride does not replace respect, and that was when confusion turned into something colder because patterns started to emerge. Comments I had brushed off suddenly felt intentional. Conversations ended when I entered the room and I realized I had been useful, not valued, and those 2 things are not the same. I stopped reacting and started paying attention, noticing how decisions were made before meetings, how certain names were floated early and how others were never considered no matter the results they delivered. And I understood that speaking up immediately would only mark me as difficult because the narrative was already written. I was not the hero in it, so I stayed quiet, not because I accepted what happened but because I needed to understand exactly who I was dealing with. I reviewed my documentation, my contracts, my non-compete clauses and internal policies, listened more, spoke less, and asked questions that sounded harmless but revealed everything. And over the next few weeks it became clear this was not an isolated slight but a deliberate strategy, and once I saw it clearly I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling focused, because if they thought this was the end of the story they were wrong. This was just the moment I realized I needed to stop playing the role they assigned me and start writing my own. I had spent months pouring every ounce of energy into the Phoenix project, working late nights, sacrificing weekends, fixing problems no one else could even understand, and I had trusted Grant Ross to honor his word when he promised me the promotion, promised that if I delivered flawlessly, the leadership role would be mine. And yet in front of the entire division he handed it to Marissa Cole, a newcomer who didn't know the first thing about the project, shaking her hand as if everything I had done didn't exist, and I watched the applause swell around us like my work had never mattered, and something inside me went cold and precise, calculating my next move. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I didn't even let my fingers tremble when I walked back to my desk, opened a blank document, and typed a 2-line resignation, effective immediately, wishing him luck, nothing more, no theatrics, just the truth laid bare. And when I slid it across his desk while he was on the phone I could see the confusion in his eyes before he tore it open and read it, his expression shifting from irritation to disbelief to panic. And he finally whispered, "Elena, is this a joke? Tell me you're joking," and I stood there steady and calm and said, "I am not joking," and that was the last time I would need him in my life. The months leading up to that moment were burned into me. Every late night, every crisis, every supplier delay, every design correction, every angry client call, I handled all of it while Grant smiled and told me, "Elena, you are the only one I trust with this project, you finish this cleanly, and the promotion is yours." And I believed him. I gave him my trust, my life for that promise, but the truth was he never intended to keep it, and the betrayal cut deeper than exhaustion ever could, and when Marissa stumbled through the technical terms, pretending competence while the applause swelled around her, I felt the humiliation settle like a stone in my chest, sharp and deliberate, and I walked out quietly, my hands steady, my expression unreadable, knowing the storm I would unleash would come later, on my terms. I spent the next few days collecting everything I had done, every email, every client approval, every internal report, every spreadsheet, every memo, every timeline, making a portfolio so precise and undeniable that no one could ever claim I hadn't earned it, and as I organized it I mapped out my next move, considering Summit Craft Machining, a competitor that valued skill and integrity, imagining myself walking into their office and showing them what I had built, the truth in black and white. And the satisfaction of knowing that the cracks at North Star were already spreading, even if they didn't know it yet, was a quiet thrill I allowed myself. Messages from colleagues at North Star began arriving, quiet notes hinting at missed deadlines, mismanaged workflows, and Marissa's struggles, and I didn't respond, I didn't intervene, I simply observed, cataloging everything, seeing the chaos unfold from a distance, each failure another reminder of the system that had tried to bury me, and I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years, knowing that leaving was the first choice I had made entirely for myself. When Daniel Soren from Summit Craft called, the conversation was straightforward. He told me the client had praised my leadership, that they had noticed how I had handled the project worth over $200,000 a quarter without a single deviation, that they wanted me to take a lead role at Summit Craft with authority, autonomy, and fair compensation, and I felt the tension in my chest release for the first time in months, knowing that the recognition I deserved was finally coming. But also knowing that the past at North Star had loose ends I could not ignore, and over the next weeks I methodically responded to inquiries from the auditors, providing every log, every email, every record to prove that Grant had taken credit for work that was not his, and as the evidence mounted, the house of cards he had built on my back began to collapse. The calls, the emails, the quiet notes from clients and colleagues all pointed to the same truth, that he had relied on me to hold everything together while he took the credit, and as the formal audit began, I stayed calm, methodical, collected, knowing that the moment of justice was coming, that the moment I had been denied for so long was about to arrive, that the promotion, the respect, and the recognition I had been promised would finally be validated, and every step I took in my new role. At Summit Craft, every decision, every plan, every interaction with my new team was proof that I had not been broken by betrayal, that I had been preparing quietly for this exact moment. I watched from a distance as Grant's control slipped, as Marissa struggled, as colleagues realized that the foundation he had claimed as his own was built entirely on my labor, and I didn't need to gloat, I didn't need revenge in the petty sense because the truth was unfolding with its own unstoppable momentum. I felt a calm satisfaction, knowing that the Phoenix Project, the hours, the sacrifices, the exhaustion, every moment had been mine, and now the world was seeing it too, and the power of my integrity, my skill, and my perseverance was finally undeniable. I watched North Star crumble quietly from the edges, every message from colleagues a breadcrumb leading me to the truth I had known all along, Marissa fumbling through reports, deadlines slipping, clients confused by conflicting updates, Grant trying to mask panic with rehearsed confidence, and I let it happen because the system that had tried to bury me was finally revealing itself. I didn't respond to frantic emails, I didn't intervene when suppliers called to report mistakes that could have been prevented, I didn't answer Marissa's desperate messages asking for guidance. Instead I cataloged everything, every misstep, every error, every moment where their lack of experience collided with the responsibilities they had been handed, and I felt a quiet sense of power because I had walked away with integrity, I had chosen myself, and now the chaos was proof that my absence mattered, that my contributions had been indispensable, that Grant's reliance on me had been absolute even as he tried to erase me from the narrative, and the audacity of watching it all unfold without lifting a finger was intoxicating. I let myself imagine the moment he would finally realize he had lost control, the moment the board would see the truth buried in emails and logs, and the moment Marissa would understand that she had been thrown into a role she was unprepared for because of favoritism. And I smiled to myself because the time for quiet observation was nearing its end. I spent hours reviewing my own records, organizing the Aurora retrofit documents. I had managed from start to finish, making sure every change order, every timeline, every email to a client, every note to a supplier was meticulously logged and timestamped, knowing that this would be the weapon that no one could argue with, knowing that my work could not be hidden, knowing that the truth would speak for itself. And while I did this, I also focused on Summit Craft, planning my transition, considering the team I would lead, the systems I would implement, and the authority I would finally wield without someone else's shadow looming over me. And it was a heady feeling, a combination of relief, anticipation, and the thrill of knowing that the next chapter would be mine entirely. 3 weeks after my resignation, the first real confirmation came, an email from an auditor I had never met, Calvin Brooks, asking for clarification on workflows, budgets, and project outcomes, and as I replied with exact logs, precise summaries, and proof of my leadership, I could see the pieces falling into place, Grant's careful narrative unraveling with each file I sent, Marissa struggling to explain what she had done when she had relied entirely on my instructions, my templates, my schedules, my foresight, and every inquiry from the board brought them closer to realizing that the empire Grant had built on borrowed credit was nothing more than a house of cards balanced on my labor. It was during those weeks that the messages started arriving from clients, terse, almost panicked inquiries about project delays, confusing updates, and missed approvals, and I didn't answer, I didn't intervene, I simply noted them, recorded them, each one a confirmation that the system had failed without me, each one a quiet validation of the value I had brought, and I allowed myself to imagine the moment Grant would see it, the moment Marissa would understand, the moment the board would connect the dots, and I felt no malice, only the satisfaction of knowing that the truth moves faster than lies. That competence cannot be erased by arrogance, and that sometimes walking away is the most potent form of revenge. Then Daniel Soren called again, this time to finalize my new role, and the clarity of that conversation hit me. I was wanted not because I had begged, not because I had compromised, but because my skill, my leadership, and my ability to manage chaos without breaking had earned me recognition and opportunity. And as I accepted the position at Summit Craft, the full weight of Northstar's mismanagement and Grant's betrayal settled into perspective, and I realized that the revenge I had been preparing would not require sabotage, it would not require confrontation, it would be built quietly, methodically, through proof, through records, through competence, through undeniable truth. Every day at Summit Craft was a reminder of what respect and authority felt like. Every decision I made was met with trust, every team I led responded with dedication, every project I managed was a testament to what I could accomplish when I was valued, and I let that success simmer in the background while the audit at Northstar moved forward, knowing that when the board finally reviewed the documentation, the recognition, the consequences, and the validation would be unstoppable, and I imagined the moment Grant's confident mask would crack, the moment he would realize that his shortcuts, his favoritism, his manipulation could not withstand the weight of documented truth, and Marissa would see that her brief promotion had been a fragile illusion resting on someone else's hard work. I didn't brag, I didn't taunt, I didn't rush, I simply waited and observed as the dominoes fell, every mistake amplified by my absence, every error made by Marissa exposing the foundations of a system Grant had tried to claim as his own. And I felt a calm, almost meditative satisfaction knowing that my work, my integrity, and my perseverance were finally visible to those who mattered, and that the final act, the moment of reckoning, would arrive with the quiet inevitability of justice served not by confrontation but by truth itself. By the time the board at Northstar began their formal review, the cracks were undeniable, every spreadsheet, every timeline, every client email I had preserved revealed the truth. And I watched as their carefully constructed narrative collapsed, Grant scrambling to explain inconsistencies he could no longer spin, Marissa fumbling to justify actions she had been ill-prepared for, and I felt the quiet satisfaction of inevitability, knowing that all the months of meticulous work, the sleepless Nights, the endless problem-solving, the late calls and frantic corrections, were finally speaking for themselves, that the weight of documented reality was crushing the arrogance and deceit that had tried to overshadow me, and while they panicked, I focused on my own world at Summit Craft, leading projects, building trust, proving that competence thrives when recognized and respected, every success a silent rebuke to the chaos I had left behind. Clients began confirming what I had always known, praising Summit Craft for efficiency, clarity, and leadership, and the contrast with North Star became even more apparent. Emails arrived almost daily from former colleagues quietly admitting they had watched the disaster unfold. They didn't reach out for help because they feared retaliation, they didn't speak up because they knew how Grant's ego operated, and yet in those messages I found validation, the knowledge that my decision to walk away had allowed the truth to surface organically, without me having to bend, without me having to compromise, and the best part was the suspense of watching them realize it for themselves. Grant's panic growing with each new inquiry, each client complaint, each internal audit, every time he opened his inbox and faced evidence that he had been relying on my work while claiming credit, the tension radiating from him was something I observed with clinical fascination because it was finally his turn to feel the consequences of the decisions he had made, and Marissa, once so proud, now struggled to maintain composure, fumbling through calls, emails, and reports, all the while unaware that her brief promotion was crumbling under the weight of reality. I began receiving calls from auditors confirming that discrepancies were being documented, Grant's inflated numbers and misrepresented achievements now undeniable, and I didn't have to speak for myself, the proof was sufficient, the logs were precise, the sequence of events undeniable, and yet the satisfaction I felt was deeper than simple vindication. It was the knowledge that months of silent preparation, months of careful observation, months of preserving integrity and skill, had built a storm they could no longer escape. Every step I had taken to protect myself had also ensured that justice would arrive quietly, efficiently, and without me having to stoop to manipulation. And when I saw the first official notice of Grant's suspension and the reassignments of Marissa to an entry-level position, the culmination of all that preparation crystallized, and I allowed myself the faintest, calmest smile because everything had played out exactly as it should. The final messages from former colleagues and clients arrived over the next days, all variations of the same story, acknowledgments that they had relied entirely on my competence, apologies for the chaos they were forced to endure, and confirmations that North Star's operations had failed under leadership that could not withstand scrutiny, and I read each one in quiet triumph. Not gloating, not rubbing it in, just quietly satisfied that my choice to leave, to preserve my integrity, had created a domino effect that revealed the truth, and in the background, Summit Craft thrived, my team respected me, projects succeeded, deadlines were met with precision, and for the first time in years, I felt the equilibrium of control, the power of autonomy, the peace of knowing that my skills and judgment were valued and trusted, all while North Star struggled to recover from the chaos I had left behind, and the irony was perfect. I had walked away and yet held the most power by simply allowing truth to do its work. The day the final report arrived from the audit, confirming Grant's termination and Marissa's demotion, I read it calmly, no shouting, no celebration, just the quiet acknowledgement that the system had corrected itself, that deceit could not hide under a mountain of falsified reports, and I leaned back in my chair, thinking of the months of work, the stress, the frustration, the sleepless nights, the unacknowledged efforts, and realized that the revenge I had sought was never about humiliation. It was about truth, integrity, and justice, and they had finally received it, fully, indisputably, and while I prepared for my next projects at Summit Craft, guiding my team, mentoring young engineers, and watching them succeed, I knew the story of what had happened at North Star would ripple outward, a cautionary tale about the cost of deceit, the power of skill, and the importance of honoring promises. And in the midst of all this, I felt an unexpected calm because the storm I had anticipated had passed, leaving clarity, fairness, and recognition in its wake, and the last trace of the past's chaos had finally been erased, replaced with a space where my work, my name, and my integrity were not only recognized but celebrated. The day I finally logged into North Star's internal portal to check the latest updates, I felt a calm thrill, the reports confirming everything I had predicted, Grant Ross suspended, under formal investigation, the discrepancies I had documented leaving no room for him to twist the truth, and Marissa reassigned to an entry-level compliance role where she would have to rebuild credibility from scratch. And I allowed myself a quiet satisfaction because the chaos they had caused, the lies, the false pride, all of it had unraveled without me having to raise my voice, without me having to intervene, just by holding fast to truth, integrity, and meticulous preparation, and I knew this was the ultimate revenge, not flashy or dramatic, but permanent, undeniable, and entirely theirs to face. Messages from clients confirming delays, errors, and mismanaged workflows kept arriving, and while I didn't respond, I observed each one carefully, noting the growing panic and the realization that Grant's empire had been built entirely on borrowed competence, and Marissa, once smiling with false confidence, was now fumbling through assignments, consulting supervisors for every decision, realizing that the role she had stolen from me demanded skills she didn't yet possess, and the subtle joy of watching them face the consequences of their choices without my interference was far sweeter than any immediate retaliation could have been. Summitcraft, by contrast, thrived under my leadership, every project running smoothly, every client meeting confirming my reputation as someone who delivers, someone who inspires respect without needing to manipulate, and I finally understood the true measure of success, the peace of knowing that competence, honesty, and hard work cannot be ignored forever, and while North Star scrambled, I built something sustainable, tangible, respected, and in full control of my destiny, proving that walking away had not been defeat, but the first decisive move in a plan they never saw coming. 2 weeks after the formal audit began, I received the official notice that Grant had been terminated, barred from holding leadership positions for 3 years, and Marissa's demotion was finalized, requiring her to complete additional training before she could lead again. And as I read the documents, I felt a serene satisfaction, not gloating, not bitterness, simply recognition that the consequences of their actions had finally caught up with them, that truth had its own unstoppable force, and that I had been patient, methodical, and precise enough to let it unfold exactly as it should. The final confirmation from Summitcraft's director was the icing on the cake. He smiled and said, "Elena, your leadership on Phoenix has already set a new standard, the clients trust you, the team trusts you, and most importantly, you can operate without anyone undermining your work or credibility," and for the first time in years, I felt an unburdened pride, knowing that my skill, my dedication, and my integrity were recognized, and that the storm I had prepared had not only protected me, it had delivered justice where words or anger could not. I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension of the past months dissolve, imagining Grant pacing his office, realizing that every shortcut, every lie, every claim to credit had been exposed, and Marissa staring at her inbox, desperate for guidance, and I allowed a small smile because the revenge I had envisioned had been quieter, cleaner, and far more effective than anything impulsive could have achieved, and while they scrambled, I thrived, guiding my team, building new systems, mentoring others, and enjoying the calm knowledge that integrity always wins in the long run, that patience and preparation are more powerful than anger or rash action, and that walking away had been the first, most crucial step toward reclaiming control over my own life and career. As I closed my laptop, reflecting on everything, I realized that revenge doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't need drama, it simply needs strategy, patience, and persistence, and the results speak for themselves. And if you've ever been overlooked, betrayed, or had someone take credit for your hard work, remember that planning, patience, and integrity can deliver justice in ways you might not expect, and that the satisfaction of seeing the truth revealed is far more rewarding than anything else. And if you enjoyed this story and want more real-life revenge stories where the underdog wins, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story where justice is served, skill is rewarded, and patience pays off.